right, everyone. Welcome into Ohio State Buckeyes Live. This is our 12th edition, and we typically come your way on a Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. We are just a one day late, and you can blame me. Family comes first, of course, and we are happy to at least catch up with all of you. And I will certainly credit these three gentlemen, and specifically, I believe, Steve and Tony, with doing their best to bring you an Ohio State Buckeyes Live show on Tuesday night. But we had some technical issues involving YouTube and Google, but they did their very best. Gentlemen, how you doing tonight?
Doing good.
Good. We got Steve Hellwagon on the line from Bucknuts, 247 Sports platform for Ohio State football. Tony Gerdeman from the ozone.net, and Kevin Noon from Rivals Buckeye Grove. I have spent extensive time on each one of those sites over the last few years. These guys do tremendous work. You can hear it right here on a weekly basis, but if you want to do the deep dive into what they bring to the table and their years of experience and insight and knowledge, then go to their respective sites. All right, so there has yet to be named a starting quarterback. This seems a bit ridiculous to a certain extent, in that we know who the starting quarterback will be. So I'm not going to ask any one of the three of you who is going to be the starting quarterback at Ohio State in week one. I will ask you that whether it tells us anything about Justin Fields' performance or Ryan Day's coaching philosophy, or there is anything to be made of the timing of Ryan Day, I believe, announcing yesterday that he will announce the starting quarterback next Monday, Tony.
Well, I think it means that he is ready to announce that it's going to be Justin Fields, but there is still a scrimmage on Saturday to take part in. So I think at this point it's obviously Justin Fields' job to lose, and I guess he probably doesn't want to say it's Justin Fields until he sees the second scrimmage, because that was always the target date they had. They wanted to go through two scrimmages before naming somebody or before starting to name somebody. And I know Gunnar Hoke was thought to be maybe the guy he is competing with, but Gunnar Hoke still has his black stripe. And until you have that black stripe removed, you're not going to be Ohio State's starting quarterback. So at this point, it's all Justin Fields. We've seen maybe an hour and a half of practice so far in fall camp, and I don't know that we've seen anybody but Justin Fields take snaps with the ones.
What do you say, Steve?
Yeah, I would agree with what Tony's saying. It seems like it's a done deal. It just hasn't been announced as such yet. And I think that the head coach, Ryan Day, and the coordinators, Yursich and Wilson, just want to keep Fields on an even keel and continue the work, because really that's still the phase of camp that they're in, the work phase, and you'll get more toward the game planning phase toward the end of next week. But I think right now they're trying to get as many reps for the guys as possible. It sounds like in the scrimmage last Saturday that the ones played about 40 reps, the twos played about 40 reps, and the threes played about 30 reps. And you would figure it'll be something like that again this week, if not more for the ones at this point, just to get a little bit more data, I suppose, and get more in there. We know that the defense had some turnovers in the various scrimmages, and that reflects back on the quarterback, some interceptions, certainly. But no one's really gone to the point of identifying whether those were Hoke passes or Fields passes or a combination of the two. And it just seems to me like everybody knows where this is headed. Fields is just such a dynamic player. And people who have seen some practice and have leaked out a few things here and there have said he's been fine. So I don't think there's any reason to bang the drum or anything like that, or hit the fire alarm or anything like that, because it sounds like he has done just fine up to this point in preseason camp. If anything, I think it's an indication that the defense has made some of those improvements that people were hoping for, and perhaps that's more indicative of what we've seen or what the coaches have seen so far. But it definitely appears it's Fields' job, no question about it.
So, Kevin, before I let you comment, I'll just acknowledge I took a bit of a misstep there. It's not ridiculous that Ryan Day has yet to announce the starter. He's the head coach of the football team. He can do whatever he likes in that regard. And I certainly give him credit for at least in theory and beyond theory, trying to make an objective evaluation of the quarterbacks and not take the recruiting rankings and the reputation and what is supposed to happen into play, trying to discard that, put that to the side, and just make a fair evaluation based on the quarterback play that he sees in front of him day to day in practice, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be short with my answer, too. I think a lot of it is just the whole messaging of nothing is promised, everything is earned, nothing is given. So, they want to go through the process, they want to go through to the second scrimmage. I don't think there was really going to be any chance. He could have been immaculate during the first week of fall camp, and they still weren't going to give him the position at that point because they want to go through it. And secondly, I'm not going to say necessarily this is a situation with Ohio State, but we see quarterbacks jumping in the portal so quickly. You need to make sure that you go through this the right way and you keep everybody happy at that point. We saw Ohio State get down to 2 quarterbacks, and I'm not saying that Chris Chugginoff or Gunnar Hoke or anybody like that is looking to jump off if they don't get the position. But with that being said, you want to give everybody a fair shake because we're in a brave new world in terms of how quarterbacks are going to be handled through the portal.
Ohio State football fans out there that join us each and every week, I hope you recognize what we have here in Kevin Noon, Tony Gerdeman, and Steve Hellwagon, their wealth of experience, their insight and knowledge into the Ohio State football program. So we talk Ohio State football here each and every Wednesday night. We're going on Thursday this week at 9 o'clock Eastern time, but we'll be back next Wednesday at 9 o'clock Eastern time. Please leave your comments, your questions, your suggestions, and I will try to pick those up in the live chat. So, Tony, before we jumped on tonight, you had mentioned, I believe, Greg Madison's comments concerning the linebackers, which were under such heavy scrutiny, namely Pete Werner and Tuff Borland for their inadequate play at times last year. But Greg Madison certainly pleased on the surface in regards to what he's seen thus far.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody yesterday and saying that I can't remember an Ohio State assistant coach being so effusive in his praise about his position, about a position group in a setting with reporters like that. Greg Madison was over the moon about Pete Werner. Was almost the same with Tuff Borland, and those are 2 linebackers who have not found much favor with Ohio State fans. Last year was a rough year for a lot of guys. And those 2 bore the brunt of a lot of the vitriol from fans and frustration. Most of it was not unearned. But again, last year's defensive system, I put a lot of the blame on Greg Schiano for everything that happened. It was the worst defense in Ohio State history in terms of points allowed, and you can't just put that on 2 linebackers, 2 of whom didn't really play in some packages, some nickel packages and things like that. But Madison really likes Pete Werner, really likes Tuff Borland, and fans, while Madison is saying these things, we're tweeting it, we're posting it on message boards, in real time, and reactions from fans were not great. They weren't happy about it. And this isn't all fans, it's just the fans who chose to respond. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with those 2 guys this year. They've bore a lot of the brunt of the frustrations. They're easy to reach on social media, or at least easy to talk about, and they have been talked about quite a bit. And I think they're going to be a lot better than they were last year. The defense seems to suit them better, allows them to react and just play more naturally, less thinking and more just reacting. And I think that's what was missing much of last year. And the linebackers should be the beneficiary of a lot of the changes this year.
Steve, anything on that front?
Yeah, I think, first of all, Tuff Borland was injured most of last season, had an Achilles issue, and I think that it was obvious that he wasn't running full bore at times and, struggled a little bit with that. again, as Tony said earlier, we have not watched these scrimmages. We haven't watched these full padded practices. We haven't watched these daily 11-on-11 matchups to see which linebackers are making plays and who's done the best. You can only go by what the coaches tell you. And if they tell you, and again, let's just take a half of a step back here. Greg Madison and Al Washington didn't recruit any of these guys. They have no vested interest in any of these guys to say, this is my guy. I brought him here. He's my guy. They're brand new from the University of Michigan. Maybe they had relationships with some of these people during the recruiting process, but they didn't bring any of these guys to Ohio State. And it's not in their best interest to play the wrong guy. So I think, we even had one thread on our board at Bucknuts saying, I question Greg Madison's sanity or his football IQ or whatever. And I'm like, you guys are missing the boat here. They're telling you who's getting the job done in practice, and that's the only way that they have to go with it. Now, if they get into games and they don't like what they see, then they are fully in their rights to put Baron Browning or Taraja Mitchell or Dallas Gant or whoever else may be in the running for these jobs. They could shove them in there, and maybe one of them will play lights out like Brendan White did last year and never come out of the lineup again after that. We don't know. But as of right now, I think they're going in the direction they feel that they should be going with those two guys.
Anything on the linebacking front there, Kevin?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Tony and Steve said as well. I mean, a lot of people, the vocal ones on social media and on the message board communities, had a little bit of a look when they heard the Greg Madison comments, but we're not there. We haven't seen what's going on. It's very easy to single some of these guys out and try and pin the issues that the defense had as a whole on them. But, from the people that I'm talking to as well, I mean, remember, Tuck Borland had a miraculous comeback from an Achilles injury. I mean, that's supposed to be a year-long injury. He was not gone for a year. I mean, he did look maybe a step slow, maybe even 2 steps slow out there, but it didn't help that these guys were also playing too close to the line of scrimmage and were taking themselves out of plays just based on the scheme that was being put out there. But I think something else that's important too is that, as gushing as Greg Madison was about Pete Werner and about Tuck Borland, I've heard a lot of the same things too about the Taraja Mitchells and the Kayvon Popes and Dallas Gants and Baron Brownings out there. I think we very well are going to see a lot of situational stuff out there where they're going to be different guys at different times, and that'll create its own debates at that point whether or not you're keeping your best guys out on the field at all times. But if there's such a small margin between them, spread it out and keep these guys fresh so you get 4 quarters out of everybody.
We've got a comment/question from Bash, please. Bash, I've got too much respect for you to actually field this question, although we will to a certain extent. Bash, 2017, 2018, are you keeping up with the trend here? Could Ohio State possibly lose at Ryan Field against Northwestern? Bash. Are you keeping up with what's possible here? Have you seen it before? Yes, they could lose. That's my short answer. Of course they could lose. Northwestern is very capable. They would not win a 10-game series. It wouldn't even come close, but they play one game for 60 minutes for 3 hours. Yes, Northwestern could beat Ohio State at home on a Friday night. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
I'll take this one. It is a night game, and I've been there for a night game back in 2004. I think was the year when Northwestern defeated Ohio State in overtime, 33-27 or something like that. So I've seen it. It's happened in my lifetime, but it seems very unlikely. They couldn't beat Ohio State last year with Clayton Thorson, who was an outstanding quarterback. And now I think what they're using, Hunter Johnson, is that it? A Clemson transfer will probably be their quarterback. And again, we don't know. The thing I keep saying about Northwestern is they open at Stanford, back home with UNLV, and then they play like murderers row in the next 3 or 4 games leading up to Ohio State. It's like Iowa, I don't know the exact order, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska. Like they go through some very tough games 5 of their first 6 games, well, really counting the week after Ohio State, 6 of their first 7 games could be against ranked teams. And that's just absolutely unbelievable. I mean, UNLV is certainly not going to be ranked. Stanford's like a top 20 type team. But all these Big Ten teams that they play in the first 5-6 weeks of that conference schedule can be ranked, including, I want to say, Michigan State the week after Ohio State. So it is a mess. They could come into that game 1-5, 2-4, something like that, and it could be 1, either they're demoralized and they're beaten, or 2, it's a game that they could turn their season around, or maybe they're just that good and they come in 4-2, 5-1. So, and they have a lot to play for. So, but I do not look for that to be an upset by Northwestern. They're just, both teams are coming off of a bye week going into that game, and Ohio State will have played Nebraska and Michigan State in back-to-back weeks, and then had an open week before going to Northwestern for the Friday night game. Unorthodox scheduling there, but I do not foresee, if they couldn't give them a good game in Indianapolis with Clayton Thorson, I don't know how they do it without him.
Because they got a better quarterback potentially in Hunter Johnson.
Okay, if you say so. Clayton Thorson's got a lot of Northwestern records on his.
He does,
as far as I know, but whatever.
That's not always the best quarterback. I think Trace McSorley has those at Penn State, and he's a really good college quarterback. I don't know that he's necessarily elite. This kid's got a chance to be elite. Again, Clayton Thorson proved it. Hunter Johnson has yet to prove it. Anybody else can chime in on this one. I actually would like all of you to chime in on the next question, because I think this is a pretty good one. Steve, we'll start with you. Who was the most explosive offensive player on this team?
Oh, man, most explosive offensive player on this team. Well, they're waiting on J.K. Dobbins to be that kind of home run hitter like Ezekiel Elliott was, and he's not quite played up to that level yet in 2 years. I would say potentially a Jalen Gill, a Garrett Wilson, Benjamin Victor's got game-breaking ability, but he's got to catch the football first. That's kind of always been the biggest problem for him. Chris Olave. Oh, man, what a debut he had the last month of the season with 2 touchdowns against Michigan. I think Chris Olave could be the guy that answers that question. But, again, we don't know enough yet about Garrett Wilson to say. And Jalen Gill, seems like he's been banged up or out of action for the last 4 years between his high school career and redshirting last year at Ohio State. I don't think we've really seen, back to 2013 maybe, and I'm exaggerating on Jalen Gill. We just don't know about him yet. But those are probably the 3 or 4 that come to mind. DeMario McCall could be dynamite in the open field, but again, how are they going to use him? How are they going to get him the ball? This is a good problem to have when you've got more people who are capable of making big plays, and you can't narrow it down to just one guy like a Paris Campbell, who was just electrifying last year. I think that it's going to be interesting to see who emerges in the first 3 or 4 games, because there will be plays that can be made when you're playing against the likes of Florida Atlantic. I don't know necessarily about Cincinnati, but Indiana and Miami of Ohio, those first, 3 of those first 4 games, there's going to be plays that can be made, and we'll see who jumps off the page at you in those first several games.
What do you think, Tony?
Well, I would throw Justin Fields in there as well, depending on how much they let him run. Remember, he's a 4.4 guy, so he has an explosive arm and can also run. JK, like Steve said, is this the 2017 JK who was even better, or is this the 2018 JK who regressed and was looking for home runs and couldn't hit them? He's another 4.4, 4.5 guy who had a lot of 30, 40-yard runs as a freshman, and then only 1 carry over 30 yards last year, which was a complete departure. I like Jalen Gill in this offense, but we don't know enough yet. He's replacing kind of what Paris Campbell used to do. So Paris Campbell had 90 catches last year. Jalen Gill, we don't know. It could be he could have 25 or he could have 70. We don't really know in this offense exactly what his role or how much he will get the ball. but he is an explosive guy. He's elusive. He's agile. But like Steve said, how healthy can he stay? Because he's had trouble with that. But when he's in there, and he only played 1 or 2 games last year, so he redshirted. But when we saw him in the spring, he made people miss. He was effective down the field, out of the slot, which is something that Paris Campbell really never was. And so if they can add that to this offense as well, that will make it more explosive. Chris Olave is talking to Paris Campbell either after last season or maybe in the spring. I don't exactly remember when it was, but he said that Chris Olave hasn't even been able to show his speed yet. He's just been doing some of the crossing routes and things like that, and he hasn't been able to show his deep speed and everything else he can do. And he's gotten stronger, as Ryan Day was talking about this past week. So he's another one. But, yeah, I don't know the most explosive. I did a ranking of the top 10 playmakers on offense for the Buckeyes, and I went with J.K. number 1 just because of the volume of touches and his potential for turning those touches into bigger gains. But most explosive, I could see that being Jalen Gill. I could see that being Chris Olave. Eventually it'll be Garrett Wilson.
So what's going through Kevin's mind right now is, Rogers, you give me the last option every time. What am I supposed to say after these guys take all the answers? Okay, we'll get it turned around for you, Kevin. But if you've got anything to add on this one.
Well, let's just list everybody on the offense that these two guys haven't talked about. KJ Hill, Austin Mack, the tight ends, the offensive line. I mean, there really isn't much left. I mean,
who's the fastest offensive lineman? Maybe that's a big question. Maybe we need to certainly go in that direction. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm going to sit there and if we're going to talk about players we haven't seen yet, I mean, if I'm a Buckeye fan, I'm hoping it's Justin Fields, because he's going to have the ball going through him every offensive play. So unless they're running a wildcat. So I think you really would want him to be explosive out there as the dual threat type of guy. I think in terms of playmakers, as Tony was talking about, I mean, you have to put KJ Hill in that mix just because he's so versatile for them, and he's just, such a big part of the offense. But I mean, I think that that Garrett Wilson really could be that guy. But I mean, I guess if I really had to circle one guy right now, just based on the little snapshot that we saw of him last year, I think Chris Olave really could be that guy with the 2 touchdowns against Michigan and a touchdown against Northwestern. And we really only saw the tip of the iceberg with him.
All right, Kevin, stay in the box here. From Matthew Kindle, who do you guys think the backup running back will be?
Well, I think a lot of that's going to depend on how healthy Master Teague is. You would think that Master Teague would kind of have a little bit of an end there just based on being a running back, whereas Demario McCall, one of the big knocks on him was just his size and his durability, and would he really be able to be in that role? But if Master is missing a significant amount of practice time, I really think that Marcus Crowley, who is a very underrated type of player, who was a player of the year in the state of Florida, I mean, he's already lost his black stripe. He's already really turning some heads in practice. I think Marcus Crowley could come in and jump into that role if Master Teague is not able to get in there and wrestle away some of those snaps at this point. And even at that point, I think Crowley is talented enough to make it a question, even if Teague wasn't hurt. And I think Teague has got a lot of upside there. But right now, I'm going to say Crowley.
Anybody else in that mix, you think, Steve?
I think Teague is working his way back in there and is going to make a tough decision on the coaches to figure out. And again, it's still over 2 weeks to the first game. So I think J.K. Dobbins is going to take a few more carries than he had. He was in the teens, I think, on average last year. I think he's going to get an additional 5. I think the quarterback's going to get an additional 5. And so there may or may not be a lot of work for the backup running back, but you certainly have to have one, as we saw last year at times. But I would think Teague, I would think it was his job to lose. I think Crowley is a guy who could mix this up, and Chambers got his black stripe off today, so he's become a fully vested member of the team as well. So you've got options. I think Tony Alford will get that group together and have 2 or 3 guys ready to go. And really, it should be a lot of fun. To me, that is one of the neat things about college football is when they turn a new running back or two loose on the world, and you just see what these guys can do. Are they inside runners? Can they get to the outside? Can they make big plays? Can they make people miss? All these other things. Every running back has a different style, it seems like. I mean, you can pigeonhole people however you want, but every guy's got his own characteristics, his own blend of strength and size. And to me, that's one of the neat things when you get into a season and you see these guys for the first time and you say, oh, now I know why Ohio State recruited this kid. It's very rare that a running back will disappoint when he's given the chance behind the offensive line at Ohio State. So I'm eager to see what each of these guys can give. And my guess is Florida Atlantic will be a game where two or three of them will get opportunities, probably Miami, Ohio as well. And then the coaches will make some tough decisions and whittle that thing down to two guys. Probably they'll all travel, all four of those guys, just in case. But potential one of them may redshirt if they only play 3 or 4 games, which because of that new rule is such a great thing. But to me, I think it's a better position group than what the coaches are portraying. Again, kind of like the quarterbacks. And I think that they're just trying to get it out of those guys on a day in, day out, consistent basis.
Anything on the running backs, Tony?
I think you also have to consider the fact that DeMario McCall, while being a veteran, hasn't been healthy in a long time. Maybe there's a question of can he even stay healthy? And Master Teague has run into some injuries as well. I wonder if does it really even matter whoever wins the job, the backup job this month, will that be the same guy in November? And if you're asking me like who is the most likely or who maybe would I put my money on to be that guy in November, I might go with Marcus Crowley over everybody else simply because we haven't seen him get injured yet. We haven't seen him have those issues. And we've seen those other guys where it kind of wears on them. But Master Teague, I believe he was back practicing this week after missing some time. I know the coaches were frustrated with that. DeMario McCall obviously out all spring. But Master Teague has 2 weeks, basically to get this done. And Ryan Davis has been one of his points of frustration that nobody has stepped up. Maybe with Teague getting back in there, he can do that. I don't think Day cares who it is as long as somebody does it. And it's not just who is the best running back, because all they keep talking about is a guy who can pick up blitzes and who can hold on to the football. It's almost like you don't even have to be able to get, don't worry about hitting home runs. Just turn a 4-yarder into a 6-yarder, hold on to the ball, and then pick up the pass rush on third downs. And if you can do that and stay healthy, then it's your job.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, bringing you college football content each and every day. We get these gentlemen on the line each and every Wednesday night talking Ohio State football. It's Thursday, of course. We know that this week. Tony, we'll keep you front and center. I'm guessing the news made it north from Miami that one Tate Martell did not win the starting quarterback job at Miami.
Yes, I saw that on the news, and then I saw it trending on Twitter. Not that that Jaron Williams won the job, just that Tate Martell lost it and then apparently no-showed the next day in practice. I never really felt like Miami was a good spot for him. The offense doesn't do what he does. I'm not sure if he was aware of that. But, this is a guy I wanted to watch him this year at Ohio State. I was looking forward to watching him at Miami next week, and I would still like to see that. I just feel like Miami was never really the spot for him. And to be honest, my feeling about Miami is when people choose Miami, it's for reasons other than football or for like football success, because Miami people just know about the football. So there's this allure to it, but you don't really go there to win championships. You go there to be able to call yourself a Miami Hurricane. And I don't know that that's really, what are you going to do with that? Can you put that on your resume? Maybe, as long as you stay in Miami.
Tony, I'll have you know they just won an ACC Coastal Division championship. They're mighty proud of that in 2017. That was a big achievement.
Hey, Michigan won a Big East, Big Ten East championship last year. So There's a lot of winning going around.
Yeah, I don't think Miami's won the ACC since they moved to the ACC. I think their last conference championship was Big East back when they played maybe a year or two after they played Ohio State for national championship. So 03 or 04, something like that. But, I mean, the ACC has been a great move, for them, for stability, obviously, and great rivalries, and Clemson and Florida State and all the other great teams. They always played Florida State anyway. But I think it's going to be neat to watch them on TV next week, and be interesting to see how the coach reacts if, they get into the game in Florida, which I figure's got to be a favorite. I mean, they got to be a top 10 team going into the season. If things go sideways, do they put Martel or the other guy, Perry, I think is the other guy who played some last year, do they put one of those guys in the game? So the game's going to be worth watching, trust me, if for no other reason, to see if Florida's legitimate.
Yeah, I certainly would have considered it to be the most intriguing quarterback battle in the country. And we are going to talk more Ohio State football and not Miami. But you did have 3 high 4/ with Martel 5 stars coming out of high school. So I think they're in a good position where you got to think that one of those 3 can play at least 1 out of 3. So as long as they make the right selection and player development, they should have a quarterback for the next couple of years. And those guys are very young, all 3 of them. Jaron Williams is only a sophomore who got the start. But if he falters, they got 2 other guys that were highly touted coming out of high school waiting in the wings. And as you mentioned, Steve, N'Kosi Perry threw 13 touchdowns, played more than half the season last year. Tate Martell, we've only seen in mop-up duty. All right, we are roughly 37 minutes into the show, and I don't believe that there's been a Jack Cohn reference by Kevin yet. I know that the folks out there, Jack or Kevin, are highly, highly disappointed in that.
Well, I've been last for almost every question, so everything has already been kind of hit. But yeah, maybe Jack Cohn can end up at Miami next year and really cloud stuff up. And from the Twitter, unsubstantiated reports that Tate Martell may actually go through some practices at wide receiver just to try and get on the field, but that's unverified at this point, but just, making its way through the social media rounds right now.
Well, that's his future. It's at slot receiver. It's not, it's in the NFL. It wouldn't be quarterback. And I know even before he was at Ohio State, there were people who thought he would be a good H-back at Ohio State, being that slot receiver guy. And it worked out for Julian Edelman, who was a dual threat quarterback at Kent State, and goes to New England and is turned into a receiver. Why not just do it in college and then base your draft status on that? Or Jack Cohn could be a receiver.
Probably not.
No? Okay.
Probably not.
Mm-mm.
All right, Mark Rogers, TV, the voice of college football. This is what we do each and every Wednesday night. Of course, it's Thursday, but we should be back to our regular time slot next Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern time. Got Steve Hellwagon on the line from Bucknuts. Please join him right there at the 247 Sports platform for Ohio State football. Tony Gerdeman hiding behind the graphics right there. There he is, Tony Gerdeman from the ozone.net. And we've got Kevin Noon. There he is from the Buckeye Grove. And also Kevin's got a YouTube channel that he posts Ohio State videos on a pretty regular basis. What do you got over there this week for us, Kevin?
Well, at this point, just what we've seen so far practice. They let us shoot a couple of periods, so we have some stuff there, and then the full interviews with Greg Madison and Ryan Day. And next week should be a big week as we get to talk to a lot of position groups. So we'll try and get a lot of interviews up there, and may even try and wrap stuff up with our new interns and do a quick reaction podcast at some point next week.
Thayer Munford starting at 1 tackle position. Do you guys want to take this on in regards to who is vying for the other tackle spot?
Kevin.
Well, really at right tackle, it seems to be a battle between Nick Petit-Frere, Josh Alabi, and Brandon Bowen. And if I had to bet right now, with a couple weeks to go to the start of the season, I'm going to say that Brandon Bowen is going to be the starter at right tackle. He did not play last year. He got hurt the year before. He was a starting guard at that point, but he was also the team's number 3 tackle. He seems to fit the tackle position a lot better just based on his size and and his footwork and everything else. So I think MPF really has him close right now. But I think if a decision had to be made and the game was going to be played tomorrow, I would give the nod to Brandon Bowen.
Yeah, I look at Bowen. I think it's his job to lose. You're talking about a guy who went down. I think he had a broken tibia, I want to say, broken leg midway through the 2017 season. And so he hasn't played in a live football game really in, what would that be, 21, 22 months, something like that. So he is really shaking off the rust this fall. And every time we've looked out there, he's been there and has been practicing. They have not been, as they say, put Thayer Munford on a pitch count, because of his back. Not that anything's wrong with Thayer Munford, but because they don't want to risk a setback with him. So they have eased him in there and had Josh Olavi as kind of a placeholder at left tackle. But to me, I think it's Bowen's job to lose. I fully expect him to start the season opener. And again, if there's something that goes wrong, then Petit Ferrer can always be ready to go. Talking with Greg Stugrawa last week, he talked about how he wanted to have 6, 7, 8 linemen ready to go, where maybe he would roll some other guys in there at various times. And he is, that kind of runs counter to what you always hear about offensive line play, that you need 5 strong guys who have built that chemistry and know what each other are thinking on every play and basically in lockstep with one another. If you start subbing out one guy on one series or whatever, you risk losing some of that cohesion. But at the same time, you also give a guy who deserves a chance to play. And I think that's important as well. So it'd be a different way to handle the offensive line from what we're used to seeing if they do substitute just sporadically with some other guys and keep the other 3 or 4 out there. But again, I think they're going to have games, guys, like Coach Stu Grawa said last year, Oregon State. They're up 21-0 late first quarter, early second quarter. And Ryan Day, the acting head coach, came down and said, put the 2s in. And they put the entire 5-man second unit in with a 21-0 lead in the first half and probably scored. I've tried to block my memory of such meaningless games like that. But the point is that if there are opportunities, they're going to play other guys.
NCIS Fanatic 21, faithful viewer, but you missed the discussion on linebackers. So please, once the video processes in post, just check out what everyone had to say about the linebackers and Greg Madison's comments about Pete Werner and Tuff Borland in particular. Don't know that I necessarily understand this next question, but I'm going to throw it up here anyway. So there was discussion this week on the Miami Hurricanes side concerning recruiting rankings and a perceived slight against the Miami program because they believe that so there's a particular running back who was a 5-star coming out of Florida who had committed to another school, now has decided to commit to Miami. I believe his name's Cheney, that he was downgraded from a 5-star to a 4-star. And we have this discussion from time to time regarding whether the recruiting rankings are swayed by what programs are being connected to that recruit to favor the likes of an Alabama, Ohio State, some of those marquee programs to make them look better in the recruiting rankings. This has to do with 7-on-7 should play more of a role in a recruit ranking shift compared to actual high school football, considering the talent they go. So I certainly don't expect any of you to take this on unless you have any insight into
Go ahead. Kevin, you used to run camps. You know all about this.
Well, I was just going to say 7-on isn't real football. I mean, it's football light. I mean, you're obviously not playing with a line. Yes, you're playing with all-star teams. I mean, especially like in the states of Florida and places like that, South Florida Express, it just is a juggernaut down there. I mean, you do have a lot of talent, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it translates to what you're going to be doing in the college game. I mean, what you're doing in the high school season is going to translate a lot better. I think it flies a lot with what we see in basketball, where you see guys that are much more into what they're doing on EYBL and all of the shoe circuits at that point compared to what they're doing on with their high schools, but I think football is a very different situation because 7-on is just a very different animal than actual real 11-on-11 football like you're going to be playing at the next level. I think that the 7-on does create some things that you can get for in terms of scouting when you're looking at these guys in terms of determining their rankings, but I don't think you're ever going to shift heavily towards 7-on-7 versus what they're doing at the high school level because of just the nature of what 7-on is. And you can't even sit there and say that guys are always taking 7-on-7 all that seriously until they get to the finals anyway. Guys get out there, play different positions than what it is they're supposed to play. You got receivers playing on defense. You've got running backs playing quarterback. I mean, I think it would just be a real mistake making that type of shift.
Yeah, I would argue that it already is too much of an effect on recruits' rankings because you get during the summer where rankings shift and change, from some of that from camp, but some of it from the 7-on-7 stuff. And like Kevin said, I mean, it's as much football as home run derby as baseball to me. And what can you really judge on somebody based on their home run, based on a home run derby? Yeah, they can hit a 70-mile-per-hour fastball down the middle. And it's just like the receivers here can deal with having one defender and the quarterback doesn't have to worry about being pressured and putting the ball precisely where it needs to be while he's about to get hit. And receivers don't have to worry about catching those kinds of passes, which are, a little bit out of range or trying to get in range. It's information, but it shouldn't be, don't give it too much weight.
I agree, and I've been doing this about 25 years, including the recruiting coverage, maybe even a little longer. And I can remember in the 90s, Ohio State recruiting kids, and in the 2000s in particular, that had offers from Southern Cal. And under Pete Carroll, if Southern Cal offered a kid, I considered that to be the gold standard because they had the best, kind of out like Alabama now, they had the best program going. They were in the national championship hunt every year. They recruited nationally. Alabama is now at that stage today. And the other thing you have to think about is the guys ranking recruits. That's part of their job, certainly, but breaking recruiting news and covering recruiting is probably just as much a part of their job as anything else. Recruiting student athletes, if Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh and Nick Saban and the rest of these guys make a bunch of mistakes in how they assess a student athlete, they're going to be out of a job because you've got to have the best talent in the country to compete for a major conference championship and a national championship. And they don't make a lot of mistakes. So I kind of go back to my first argument that in those days when USC would make an offer, or nowadays if Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State make an offer, that's the gold standard. And it should raise a guy's recruiting ranking, and oftentimes it does. So if those schools feel you're good enough to play at their program, you're probably in the top 500, if not the top 300, if not the top 100. So that's just kind of the way I look at it. 7-on-7 is kind of the same as AAU basketball. We have a kid here locally who was a fabulous high school basketball player and willed his team deep in the tournament. Great player, puts up big numbers in high school basketball against suburban teams here in Columbus. But when he goes on the AAU circuit, he struggles to score 6 and 7 points a game. And people wonder, well, what's the matter with him? Well, it's because he's playing great competition. So I think the 7-on-7 thing can be an indicator, but I don't think it is strictly how you would judge somebody, just as I don't think AAU should be or offers. I think it's a conglomeration of all of it.
I'll jump on one thing, though, too, about when offers breed offers. So sometimes when a school jumps in and like Ohio State offers a kid, Michigan, Tennessee, Wisconsin, and LSU will follow because it turns into a situation of where, oh, well, they saw something there. They must have had him at a camp. They must have seen this. What are we missing? And two, I think, without turning this into a giant recruiting situation, just football recruiting in general, when you're recruiting out of your footprint, when you're recruiting out of your state, you've got to just offer to be in the game, to have a seat at the table even. I mean, we talk about offers versus offers. I mean, there definitely is a lot of truth to that. So, it's a real mess sometimes trying to figure out what's going on, especially too with the advent of everybody self-reporting their offers on social media. We have a lot of times where we run around and we have warnings internally within the Rivals publisher chat saying this kid is reporting offers that are not real. So you have to be careful of all of that too.
Well, and Urban Meyer even said at Ohio State, when a Florida kid commits to you, that just means he's interested, and then you still have to recruit them like they aren't recruited or they aren't committed to you. And and then the in-state kids you can't offer too early because they will commit, and now you might be stuck with somebody that you didn't really want. And you'll see like Alabama throw out some offers to Ohio kids, seemingly to force Ohio State's hand to see how they react to it. So there's the games within the games and all of that. There's tons of drama, and that's why people pay $10 a month to so many different sites to follow it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
God bless you.
People love the recruiting. It's not a thing for me, but I've got to cover it and utilize guys like you more so than anything, because people just love the recruiting. They want to win recruiting battles as much as they want to win football games.
It's another sport.
Absolutely.
It's another season of their favorite sport.
It's soap opera for men. I mean, it's a big soap opera, and
it's not better than wrestling. Come on, dude.
Well, it's a little more consistent than wrestling.
Speaking of which, I'm sure you guys realized how magnetic your presence is and how enthralling these conversations are. Jesse Sullivan here says, I care nothing about Ohio State, but this is entertaining.
I agree.
There you go. Thanks, Jesse. And I enjoy this comment from Justin Furman a little bit better. Mark Rogers TV, best in college football coverage and analysis from C to Shining C. I'm going to clean up the typo there. Smash that like button, people. Please do that. James Warner, on the surface, this is a very simple question, but I'm going to delve a little bit deeper because Justin Fields is a very young quarterback, so he should be around for quite some time, barring injury, and hold down that position at Ohio State if he comes anywhere close to fulfilling his potential. But considering Jack Miller signed for committed for 2020, I can't think of the other kid's name.
McCord.
That is in the fold.
McCord.
Yeah, McCord. Your thoughts about the Ohio State quarterback situation, Tony, going forward?
They're behind the eight ball. They have talent lined up, but it's Ryan Day wants ideally 4 scholarship quarterbacks, and he said back one of the signing days that might not be possible anymore because of the transfer portal. But if you look, they have no quarterbacks that they've actually recruited and signed on the roster. Jack Miller and Justin Fields will be 2 guys next year. You've got Gunnar Hoke, who will be a senior next year. But in terms of guys that they actually recruit and sign, they probably won't have 3 of their own guys until 2022. And that's just 3. Ryan Day wants 4. And so they, maybe they can take a second one this year. I think they should if they could, if Jack Miller would be okay with it, which I believe he says he is. And so to get those quarterback numbers up, they've been this way. They weren't this bad last year in this situation, but it was similar. And you can't keep just riding that rail with one great quarterback or one good quarterback, and then the rest guys that you don't necessarily want to have to play. And that's why, you go if you can get 2 guys this year, then you've got those 2 guys along with Justin Fields and Gunnar Hoke next year. You feel a little bit better about it, but you still don't feel great because you have 2 freshmen and a guy that you didn't recruit out of high school with Justin Fields. It's better than this year. But then you look at 2021, where if Justin Fields is as good as you think he is, he won't be here in 2021. So now you're back to 2 second-year guys, if you can sign 2 this year, and then a freshman, Kyle McCord. And that's still not great. And so you're looking – you have to go down 2022, 2023 before you start feeling like you can breathe again, to get it to where Urban Meyer had it, where Cardale Jones is your third quarterback. It's going to be a while before they get to that.
Yeah, the transfer portal has changed the entire game, and particularly at the quarterback position, because if you don't feel that the opportunity is going to be there, and you look at Matthew Baldwin, he went through the spring practice and saw that competition at quarterback was strictly lip service and was getting nothing but second-team reps, and he was out the door. Or he must have believed Justin Fields will have a death grip on this job for the next 2 seasons or whatever. But at any rate, their handpicked guy, Baldwin, who could have been the starter after Fields left in a couple of years, jumped out of there and went to TCU. And I believe he did not get his case for immediate eligibility, but still feels the grass is greener at TCU than it is at Ohio State. And that's just one example. So I don't know what to say. There's nothing that the coaches can do about it other than manage the situation on a day-to-day basis and build those personal ties with the players so that when the chips are down, everybody doesn't cut and run on them. And that's all you can really do, is build those personal relationships and hope that a Jack Miller and a McCord in particular have said they're coming to Ohio State. You have to hope that they do. That's about all you can really do with it.
Right. With modern recruiting, you have to wait until the ink's dry on the letter of intent at this point. I mean, help is on the way. I mean, Jack Miller is a top 250 guy. Kyle McCord's a top 50 guy in his class in 2021. They are trying to get another quarterback in 2020, it appears. So, I mean, you're going to have to really sweat it through this year. I mean, that's not taking anything away from the guys that'll be backing up Justin Fields at this point, but they're just not going to necessarily have the type of depth. And it'll come together. I mean, he does want to have 4 guys there, and I mean, maybe the guy that they brought in, who's in as a preferred walk-on out of California, JP Andre, will turn into something. I mean, he did not have a lot of offers coming out of high school, to be honest, but you never know. I mean, you never really circle the names of these preferred walk-ons, but I mean, he was somebody that they thought enough about to bring in all the way from Southern California. I mean, maybe he turns into something. So, it's just gonna take a little bit of time to fill out the roster.
I got to take advantage of this comment by Deep Barat. I might need to purchase Mark Rogers Premium. It amazes me at how many people can't spell my last name. This is the standard spelling of Rogers, Rogers, no D, but that's fine.
Blame Aaron Rodgers.
Yes, the Aaron Rodgers may affect that. Buck Rogers, I believe, was with a D as well. But Kenny Rogers,
the standard bearer right there, Kenny Rogers.
Think of anybody else? Pardon me?
Kenny Rogers is the standard bearer of all Rogers. If anything, that should be the only spelling of it.
Well, what about Roy Rogers?
I said Roy Rogers, so they would be the previous standard bearer of the Rogers surname. But anyway, so what Deep Barat's referring to is, if you grab the description section below, look at the link there that says the Voice of College Football Community, you get my weekly predictions right there. If you want to know what my track record is making predictions on games, then you check out the video I posted earlier today, where I run down my prediction record both against the money line, against the spread, college, NFL over the last 10 years or so. All right, we've got Trey chiming in with a contribution as well, so we appreciate that, Trey. Thank you so much for the contribution, helping us build the channel. So again, we appreciate on the Super Chat, you have the opportunity to help us build the channel, and also just the likes, the comments, the shares, and the subscriptions to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So Trey wants to know what the chances of Michigan beating Ohio State would be. Of course, we are 12 games away and 3 to 4 months away, so we don't know what those chances are going to be right now, but I understand the spirit of the question. So I'm going to say 30 to 35% chance. That's my number.
Well, I was watching something on Twitter, or maybe it was ESPN's percentages or something, and it was 57% based on whatever algorithm that they're using, that Michigan would defeat Ohio State. So that puts Ohio State at 43%, I guess. But again, this past week, as I promised to do a couple weeks ago, I re-ranked the consensus top 20, and Ohio State, which is like sixth or something in the fifth or sixth, jumps up to a tie for second with Georgia when you re-rank the top 20 based on recruiting rankings, which I looked at class rankings and national top 100 players. Ohio State actually has the second most national top 100 players on its roster behind Alabama. It actually has more national top 100 players on its roster than Michigan, Penn State, and Michigan State, its next three nearest teams in the division combined over the last 4 recruiting cycles.
Actually, Steve, I think it's what? Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, Rutgers, Illinois, Indiana put together.
Yeah, probably the entire division. I mean, when you think about it, but I just looked, it was very close. It was like 38-37, something like that. Ohio State's got like, I want to say 37 national top 100 players on its roster between the last 4 classes. And really the class that was their best class out of that cycle was, I want to say 2018. Those guys are starting to come of age right now. The current sophomores and redshirt freshmen for OSU. So what I'm saying is ESPN and their algorithm can say whatever they want. And Shea Patterson, in his defense, was nearly as highly rated a quarterback as Justin Fields was. He was a national top 5 or top 10 guy going to Ole Miss 3 or 4 years ago, and now is wrapping up his career at Michigan. But he's the exception to the rule. Donovan Peoples-Jones obviously was a national top 25 prospect as well. But Ohio State's lapping the field in terms of talent on hand, but only 11 guys can play at a time. So that may be the misnomer that makes it a little bit more competitive for those other teams in the East to play with Ohio State.
Hey, Cheryl, send me a email concerning your concern right there, markrogerstv@gmail. markrogerstv@gmail. Cheryl, just send me something involving your concern about what was written there in the live chat. Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone, Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts, and Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove joining us each and every Wednesday night, typically at 9 o'clock Eastern time. That would be. We got Florida State at 7, Miami at 8, Ohio State at 9. The Buckeyes breaking up that ACC contingent at 9 o'clock Eastern time every Wednesday night. And we've got football on the horizon, just about, about 15 or 16 days away, something in that range, with that Saturday against the mighty Lane Kiffins. All right, gentlemen, thanks for stopping by. Unless there's anything else, I'm certainly open to any other topics or anything else, but I have scanned the entirety of the chat room, and I don't think there's anything else that we need to cover.
Sounds like early next week will be big, naming the quarterback potentially, naming captains potentially, and a flock of players will be made available for interviews Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, and then they'll kind of go dark until the following week when it'll be game week.
Good stuff. Again, it's Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone, Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts, and Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove doing just a bang-up job on Ohio State football coverage each and every week here and on a daily basis at their respective sites. And you can also catch this version, this segment, this live stream that we broadcast each and every week on Bucknuts, as Steve is kind enough to post it there. And then you can also read some of his comments and introduction into the topics right there at Bucknuts on 247 Sports. All right, guys, I think we've done enough damage. Thank you so much for stopping by as always.
Take care.
Thank you.
We'll see everybody else later as well.